My experience with the home gallery was fantastic. My name's Sebastian Harrison. I've been living in Malibu on and off since 1987. My father bought the property in 1987 and I lived with him until he kicked me out. After a couple weeks, I'd find my own place and then I'd come back. I was always gravitated toward Malibu ever since I was a little boy. And finally, I was able to afford to rent one of his guest houses. And then when the property next door came up for sale in 2010, I was able to buy that property. Basically, I've been neighbors with my father for many years. Either his tenant or his neighbor for 25 years. So this is basically a family compound. My father bought this property in 1987. He had been living in Italy for many years, where he was working as an actor. And he bought this property and it needed a lot of work. And he spent 10 or 15 years completely redoing everything. And there were several guest houses on it. There's a main house, a couple of guest houses on it, and he made this in arguably one of the nicest estates property-wise in Malibu. And I was living in one of the guest houses, and then the property next door came up for sale, and I was able to buy that. And the property next door was beautiful property, but an older property and needed a little bit of work. So I've been kind of following my dad's footsteps and refurbishing that property. And I got to a pretty good point until the fire came out. Now I have to kind of start over, as we do here too.
You know, we're just getting a really strong gust of wind that's blowing a lot of ash right toward us. So we are in an area known as Malibu Village, and look at this devastation here.
My next guest, unfortunately, is playing a starring role, something that he's frankly used to as an actor, but this harrowing experience is just, it's all too real. Watch.
So last year at around, it was January 6th, I got all these alerts on my phone about the wind, the high wind, and I was at Joshua Tree, but there's one thing that really scares me about Malibu is the potential to have a fire. And anytime it's very windy, basically can turn into something catastrophic. So I decided to, with my wife, we said, look, that wind kind of freaks me out. Let's cut our trip short and start heading back. And just in case, so that we're on the property, just in case there's an ember that flies from a mile or two away, I can put it out. So we decided to, on the 7th, January 7th, to start coming back. And during the drive back from Joshua Tree to LA, the fire came out. So by the time we got near the property, first of all, they wouldn't let us back to the property. They cut us off at Duke, so I walked in, and my goal was to get my dad and all the tenants off the property. And my dad was saying, don't worry, I've been through this before, we'll talk about it when you get here. I said, no, Dad, this time it's time for you to go. Don't worry about it. And I said, okay, I'm there in 5 minutes anyway. So when I got here, I said, Dad, it's time to go. It's time to go, get your stuff. And he said, grab my cat. So I got the cat, put it inside his little box. In the meantime, my wife called the police, so about 5 police cars came up, and I said, look, do me a favor, help my dad to get off the property. I'm gonna make sure there's no other tenants. He got off, but I stayed back, and I was watering, and quite honestly, I felt pretty sure that nothing major was going to happen, because across the street there were 10 fire trucks. So I thought, okay, I'm just gonna water a couple of the houses, and when and if it's time to go, I'll go down onto PCH and tell the fire trucks, look, there's properties up there, make sure you put it out. By the time the fire approached the hill adjacent to the house and I went down, I was quite shocked that there were no firefighters. So there was not much I could do after that except for just watch the property burn. Yeah, one by one I saw all the structures and houses, and memories just vanish very, very quickly. I know a lot of people in this neighborhood, been here for many years, and I knew a lot of friends that lost their places, so I contacted a few of my friends and expressed my condolences, and we spoke about it. But really, my very first thing was, the way my mind usually works is to get things done. You know, it doesn't really do much good to sit around and pout about things. My main goal was to get my dad back up into a place as quickly as possible. He's 89, he'll be 90 in a couple of months. And nowadays, to do anything, you need to have a phone, know how to download an app, know how to use QR code. And these are all things that, first of all, his phone and his iPad burned, So he didn't even have that to begin with. But I knew I would have to be very much hands-on to make him comfortable. And you know, it's one thing when you're at any age, it's bad. His age, when you lose everything, you feel very, very vulnerable. So the neighbor who's been here since 1960s, all his life, who's also in his mid-80s, I've been trying to help him as well. And just, you know, more than anything, just trying to get people back on their property into a place that they can call home again. Ever since the fire, I've talked to a lot of people, and some of them say, look, we don't have the resources to rebuild, it's too much effort, too much time, we're too old, we don't have the money, and they want to sell. And most of them, they don't want to sell, but they feel compelled to sell. So I've been trying to basically convey to as many people as I can that there are other alternatives. It's not just the $800 or $1,000 a square foot traditional building method that you can use. You can be back on the property. There's a way to be back on the property in months as opposed to years. So I've been trying to point people in the direction that I believe is the right direction. That it was, because you know, our situation is not singular just to us. There's a lot of people that definitely want to be back on the property, didn't want to waste a lot of time to do so, and maybe didn't have the financial resources. I mean, most people didn't have the financial resources to go through the traditional building methods. So right after the fire, I looked into modular homes immediately because I know they're quicker and they're more cost effective, and time is of the essence in this case. Found out about the home gallery through someone who had gone through the Woolsey fire, and they recommended me. And I explored that avenue also because being local means they understand the nuances of all the regulations and how to deal with the code. I made an appointment to look at some of their structures, which were, you know, conveniently nearby. Liked what I saw, liked the people behind the company, and I decided to go that route, but not before exploring every avenue on the planet. I knew that I couldn't do stick-built because it just takes too long. And a lot of the modular homes I saw had a really low ceiling, which, especially for a property like this, which it's all about the view and about, you know, being light and airy, you need a great view and take advantage of the property and the ocean views. The one thing that really stood out was the quality of the craftsmanship and the high ceilings. I think the biggest challenge was, you know, it's 800 square feet. My father said, well, I want a bedroom. And my stepmother said, well, I want a bedroom. Well, I want a bathroom. Well, I also want a bathroom. Well, I want a big kitchen. Well, I also want a big living room. But we were able to squeeze 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a nice kitchen, open floor plan into 800 square feet. And it's beautiful and comfortable. Customization aspect was there's a lot of different choices and variables. Luckily, my wife, who has great taste, helped my stepmother and my father to a certain degree in choosing the different colors for the different color schemes and the tiles and patterns for everything. My father also, he's got a very good artistic eye. That was smooth because we literally went to the office and there were samples, not just pictures, but actual raw samples that people could pick and choose from. So that was a couple of hour thing. And plus, you guys were able to put it on a big display and actually show the layout and show 3D renderings of what it would look like. So there wasn't too much second guessing involved, which made everyone's life very easy. You know, going through a fire, trying to get a home back on a property in Malibu is never easy. There's a lot of regulation. There's kind of a no-growth mindset, philosophy in Malibu. But I have to tell you, people at the city, all the building and the planning department, they were extremely helpful. Obviously, they have to follow their guidelines, but they're helping you do it and they're sympathetic and they understood, especially in my case, my situation with my father and trying to get him back as quickly as possible. Having said that, you can't sidestep the regulations. Now, one thing I really like about the home gallery is that they've been working with planning department for many, many years, so they know what they're looking for, and they're able to make a call and say, hey, let's get an appointment and let's iron out the details. The fact that this is the very first structure back in Malibu that people are living in, that must mean something. First of all, it was a very tight squeeze. I think there was maybe an inch on either side. Interesting to watch. Putting something so large on this size of a pad You guys had special equipment, I think you called like a pigtail access or something like that. It was very joyful time for me to see after many months when, sure, you get emails, you have conversation, but when you see something physical on the site. So when they finally saw it come up, I think that it was a sigh of relief for the entire family. My experience with the home gallery was fantastic. I mean, they became kind of part of the family. And what I really appreciate more than anything is that they did extra things that were not in the contract, that were thousands of dollars, but they did it at their dime, and they were happy to do so because, their goal was to get my dad back in the property. They saw how important it was for me, and it was also important for them. We weren't just a number. We were someone, it was a project and it was a goal for them to finish. So for me, once it was inhabitable, it was a huge, huge victory. As a matter of fact, the first time I stepped into the place, I was here for about 2 or 3 hours. It was a beautiful sunset, and I was looking at every little detail, and I was so happy for him to finally get him out of this RV.